Hey guys, tonight we plunge headfirst into the mud-choked nightmares of a World War I trench, where every breath tastes like iron and fear is your constant trenchmate. You trudge into a damp, rattling network of rail-reinforced walls and barbed wire, hearing distant explosions that feel like the planet itself is cracking open beneath you. You probably won't survive this unfiltered dose of frontline reality. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is for you in the comments, because I love knowing who's tuning in. And when you're braving these trench tales in your corner of the world, now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You plant your muddy boots on rotting duckboards, laid above sludge that looks more like soup than solid ground. Fact: Britain's First Army dug over 4,000 miles of trenches between 1914 and 1918, turning Western Europe into a giant worm-eaten battlefield. You can almost feel the steel rails creak under the weight of fresh uniforms and dying hopes. Historians still argue whether digging deeper parapets was safer than patching existing walls. Your life hangs in the balance of that debate. Your senses reel the cool dampness, kisses your cheek, and you notice a faint, unsettling scuttle beneath you. Cue the fringe tidbit: some soldiers swore they trained rats to fetch bits of bread from mess tins, though others claim that's just trench folklore born of desperation. Either way, these whiskered nightmares are your nightly escorts, scampering freely across decomposing floorboards and occasionally fallen comrades. You sidestep a puddle that reaches your calf, thankful for the wooden slats underfoot, but knowing full well they won't hold forever. Every planked path is a ticking clock toward trench foot, a condition that turned toes from flesh to blackened stumps when feet stayed wet for days on end. You'll learn soon enough why footwear inspection wasn't just a bureaucratic fuss, but a life-or-death ritual. Up ahead, a dim lantern swings beside a narrow firing step. You stick your rifle barrel out through the firing hole, heart drumming as if it knows the next second could be your last. The wind carries a distant boom, another shell somewhere on the horizon, its whistle a grim lullaby. Shellfire pockmarks the mud into crater bowls, and you can't help but wonder if that cratering was an intentional tactic or just the chaos of artillery overshoot. Historians still argue whether the early 1915 shells were more effective than the later high-explosive models in breaking enemy lines. A rat skitters over the barrel of your Lee Enfield rifle, an uncomfortable trench art collaboration you never ordered. You brace yourself, wondering if this steel monstrosity will protect you or simply weigh you down when it's time to linger behind the front. The acrid smell of cordite from yesterday's bombardment still hangs in the air, mingling with a faint tang of stale tobacco from nearby half-burned cigarettes. Your corporal clicks his heels against the plank and mutters a dark joke about recruit lice couture, earning a soft, tired chuckle from the men huddled in the gloom. Despite the horror you find yourself sharing in that twisted camaraderie, because sometimes a grim quip is the only thing that slices through the tension. Yet beneath every laugh is the soft thump of fear. Because out in no man's land, one wrong move could send a sniper's bullet whispering through your skull. Under the flicker of a single bulb, you glimpse the muddy shadow of a fellow soldier checking trench boots for loose nails. The waterlogged leather squeaks as he pulls them off, revealing thick socks, pinned with nails to hasten drying, an improvised method no official manual mentions. You wonder if such makeshift hacks saved more toes than the official medical kits supplied by the army ever could. And so, your first night in the trench unfolds: no grand speeches, no heroic charges, just you, the mud, the rats, and the constant echo of artillery. You settle down against the cold wall, gripping your rifle like a lifeline, knowing sleep will be fleeting and nightmares all too real. The world above has turned into a distant memory, reduced to letters and faded photographs stored in your tunic pocket. This is only the opening act of your trench saga, and already you're rethinking any romantic notions of wartime glory. Remember that scuttling rat at your feet, just one of many small horrors awaiting you in the chapters ahead. You brace yourself as you step deeper into the trench, and instantly the mud sucks at your boots like a relentless hungry beast. Each footfall is an effort. Your once sturdy, leather-soled boots slide forward only after a tug of war with sticky mud that glues you to the ground. Waterlogged earth says hello with a soft squish, and you realize duckboards are your only salvation. Fact, Allied trenches averaged around 8 feet deep and were lined with wooden duckboards to elevate feet above the mire and prevent soldiers from sinking into the sludge. Yet even those planks feel perilously thin under your weight. Around you, puddles the size of small ponds shimmer in the dim light of lanterns. Their surfaces mirror the lantern's flicker, casting dancing ghosts across the trench walls. You squat to test the depth, watching ripples cascade outward, as if you've disturbed some hidden water monster. Fringe tidbit: some troops claimed they saw tadpoles swimming in trench puddles, and an eccentric handful insisted those amphibians carried messages from the afterlife. Whether true or not, every soldier whispered that creatures thrive down here that nature never intended, giving a whole new meaning to trench ecology. College lectures still debate whether it was thigh-high sandbags or sloped drainage channels that best exposed trench water. Historians still argue whether early attempts at drainage improved conditions or inadvertently created deeper, colder mud pits that trapped heat and disease. You can feel that debate beneath your skin, cold moisture seeping through uniform seams, chilling your bones, reminding you that theory and reality are cruelly different. You wade through a particularly broad pool and nearly lose a boot when your foot plunges ankle deep. A soft pop echoes as you yank your leg free, half expecting to pull out a muffled scream of protest from your boot itself. Joke to yourself, who knew mud could be such a clingy ex? You wipe the sludge off on a nearby wooden beam, only to smear it onto your sleeve. Proof that mud is the trench's unsolicited makeup artist. As you press on, the muddy walls drip with condensation that purls and falls in steady streams. A rhythm emerges, drip, 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 like a metronome, marking every second of your slow trudge. At times, you swear you're walking through a primordial swamp rather than a man-made defense line. The smell is a heady mix of wet earth, rotting wood, and something faintly metallic. Nearby, a comrade stoops to clear a clogged drain using a bayonet as an improvised spade. You see him lean forward, blade sinking into the muck, and you half expect to emerge with a mud-caked gold coin. Fringe rumor some units tossed coins into trench water as a good luck charm, believing the weight would keep the trench spirits at bay. You bite back a smirk about as effective as tossing a pebble into a hurricane. Your nerves tighten as you pass the latrine pit, a crude hole lined with planks and covered by a swinging door. A rank bouquet of humanity's byproducts greets you, and you wonder if any doctor ever found a cure for the stench. Historical note: by the end of 1915, over 75,000 British soldiers suffered trench foot, a condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp, unsanitary, and cold conditions. The numbers rose despite regular inspections, showing how elusive prevention could be. Historians still argue whether medicated foot baths or stricter rotation schedules would have saved more feet. You catch sight of your reflection in a shallow puddle. Pale face, wide eyes, helmet perched like a tin can. You try to straighten your expression, more stoic soldier. less lost tourist on a muddy vacation. The damp drips from your chin as you adjust your cap only to send more water cascading down your neck. The chill sneaks in, wrapping around your spine like cold fingers. 3 light jokes echo through your mind to break the tension. If mud were currency, you'd be a millionaire. Maybe next time they'll serve mud-flavored stew. And you could swear those puddles are developing their own culture at this point. Each quip is a tiny flare of humor, brief, bright, and swallowed by the trench's gloom almost instantly. Ahead, a plank-covered ladder leads to a wider section, where you pause and look back. The trench stretches like a wounded serpent winding off into darkness. Mud masks every wall, every board, every boot, binding everything in its sticky embrace. You hear a hollow thump underfoot, another sign that duckboards can fail without warning. You remember the rat from last night, that audacious rodent, darting across those same boards unbothered by wet or war. A callback to earlier unease. If rats can handle this, why can't you? A sudden rush of cold air blasts past you, announcing a shell passing overhead. You reflexively crouch, sending mud spraying in a fine arc. A comrade yelps, then laughs, because after a point, panic and relief blur into the same wild grin. You exchange a weary nod, half appreciative of the shared insanity, and half wondering if your sense of humor will survive the next barrage. The trench bottom slopes slightly here, creating a mini canal that gathers half a bucket's worth of water with every passing hour. You contemplate engineering a dam, imagining yourself promoted to trench civil engineer. In that daydream, you ride a steamroller through the line and declare victory over mud. Reality check, your sergeant would shoot you for turning the trench into a construction site mid-battle. Tiny green flecks of algae coat the wood, betraying weeks of stagnant water. You pause, brush a finger across the surface, and taste the earthiness, like sipping bass-infused soup by accident. You cough, spluttering mud spores into the freezing air. Sensory detail. The cold trickles through your gloves, creeping up your arms until even your armpits feel icicles forming. You finally reach a firmer patch, if you can call it that. Here, the boards end, leaving shallow mud that barely hides the duckboards below. You step gingerly, feeling each board, flex under weight, and you're reminded that your life depends on these simple planks as much as on your rifle. Historians still argue whether reinforcing trenches with steel supports would have reduced collapses or simply funneled water faster to the bottom. A sudden drop in the dripping symphony catches your ear. You're under cover now, where walls lean inward to form a makeshift roof. Tarpaulin flaps overhead, dripping rainwater in intermittent streams that land on your helmet with soft pings. You tilt your head back and grin wryly. At least it's not your hair getting wet this time. Trench fashion courtesy of muddy bangs. By the time you reach the end of this soggy stretch, your socks feel like they're filled with cold porridge, and your boots weigh twice their original heft. You shake them out, hoping to dislodge at least half the water, but the mud clings like an overenthusiastic fan. You give a theatrical sigh, your only concession to dramatics in this world of dirt and dread. And so, the trench's mud and water nightmares leave you cold, damp, and oddly exhilarated, proof that surviving here isn't just about courage, but about fighting the elements inch by slimy inch. You crouch low as the trench walls narrow, and immediately the flicker of a match reveals movement at your feet. Rats the size of cats darting over discarded kit and debris. Their beady eyes shine in the lamplight, and you swear one paused to glare at you as if judging your muddy appearance. Fact soldiers reported rat infestation so severe that each trench was estimated to house over 8 million of the vermin during peak fighting in 1916. Yet, despite the horror, you can't help but admire their tenacity. Historians still argue whether these rats proliferated, mainly due to the trench's food waste or the corpses left unattended. Either way, their population exploded in the perfect breeding ground of war's chaos. Your heart pounds as you step over a bloated rat, stumbling atop a rotting stretcher, its belly distended like a water balloon, likely feeding on fallen soldiers. Fringe tidbit: a handful of enterprising troops train rats to pull small carts loaded with scraps across shallow duckboard channels. Though many believe this was a trench gossip spun from boredom. You shake your head, trying to focus on the task at hand, navigating this labyrinth of mud, wood, and rodent real estate. A sudden squeal erupts nearby as a rat skitters into a makeshift latrine, disappearing beneath the wooden flap. You shudder, recalling the foul stench that clings to those spots, so pungent that some men refuse to relieve themselves without gagging. In the dim light, the trench walls look streaked with telltale rat droppings, ticking like tiny bombs underfoot, ready to trigger disease, or at least an involuntary yelp if stepped on. Sensory detail: you inhale sharply the sharp tang of ammonia, hitting your nostrils mingled with a faint undertone of decay, so potent it seems to layer over every other smell. You pause by a crate of rations stacked against the wall. A comrade cautions you to keep it sealed tight. Rats are notorious for chewing through canvas and wood to reach biscuits and preserved meat tins. Dry biscuits turned into sawdust delight for the rodents, while bully beef tins became their all-you-can-eat buffet. Joke: well, at least someone's enjoying the chef's stew. You force a chuckle, the sound echoing oddly in the cramped space. Your fingers brush against the plank beneath and you feel a soft, warm pulse. Some rat burrow may be scuttling by just below the surface. You lift your boot, half expecting to dislodge a rat burrowing greedily through the slats. Instead, you dislodge a clump of wet earth that lands with a dull thud. You glance back and see your friend rifling through ration packs, tossing out half-eaten tins that he claims taste like metal soap. Fringe rumor some soldiers mix tin shavings into their stew to ward off rats, though most agree it only shredded their teeth. Despite the grim scene, camaraderie persists. One soldier waves you over brandishing a tar-soaked rat pelt he salvaged for warming his gloves. He claims it's better than nothing insulation, and several men sew them into their jackets, an odd trench couture you didn't see on any Paris runway. Historians still argue whether these makeshift rat mittens provided real warmth or simply added another layer of grime to an already filthy uniform. A sudden crack above warns of enemy movement in the trench opposite, and the rats scatter in panic, their squeaks merging into a single high-pitched chorus. You freeze, rifle ready, as shadows flit across the wooden beams overhead. Your pulse races, but the rats are gone before you can even aim, a reminder of how quickly life can vanish here, whether rat or man. You press on, stepping over fresh droppings and stepping carefully on soundless duckboards. You recall the first section's opening mud rats and the battlefield's relentless percussion. That distant heartbeat of shellfire is background music to this rodent-infested symphony. In these cramped confines, survival is a daily negotiation, with creatures large and small, each vying for a scrap of territory. By the time you reach the next crossroads where a narrow passage joins from the support trench, you're acutely aware of every twitch in the rotting planks beneath you. The trench may have been engineered by humans, but the rats remain its undisputed landlords, and you're a guest in their domain. You brush your sleeve against the rough wood, flinching as a drop of unknown liquid splatters onto your hand, proof that in this vermin kingdom, nothing stays clean for long. You take a steadying breath, wondering if this nightly rat parade is a form of twisted amusement for fate. You light another match, letting the glow chase away shadows, and remind yourself that at least you're not alone. Facing these beasts, millions of others are right beside you, sharing in the same grim reality. Your trench saga continues each step, an act of defiance against the world's most unwanted tenants. You huddle against the damp earth as the horizon erupts in a thunderous roar. And in that instant, your eardrums feel like they're being played by a rogue percussionist. The artillery barrage isn't just noise, it's a living creature that crawls inside you, rattling bones and reverberating in your skull. Fact, by 1917, over 80,000 British troops were diagnosed with shell shock and early term, for what we now understand as combat-related PTSD, caused by prolonged exposure to heavy bombardment. The concussion waves from exploding shells travel farther underground, turning the trench into a disorienting drum of destruction. You press your back into the sandbagged wall and feel the vibrations ripple through the wood and steel rails as if the entire structure is shuddering in terror. Whistle shrieks above you, the telltale hiss of a shell, slicing through the air, its trajectory a deadly arc. Fringe. Tidbit, some soldiers swore that shells scream differently depending on the manufacturer. German 7.7 cm rounds supposedly howled like banshees, while British 18-pounders whistled with a more melodic pitch. You chuckle darkly. Next time you're choosing your soundtrack, you'll go with the banshee mix. Historians still argue whether the term shell shock described purely a physical brain injury or also encompassed emotional trauma. Either way, the symptoms are real and relentless. You notice your hands tremble as you adjust your helmet strap, trying to steady the quiver in your fingers. Each click of your rifle's bolt sounds disproportionately loud, echoing like a pistol shot in a silent hall. Your heart trills in your chest, a mocking echo of the distant artillery. You force yourself to inhale, slowly, lungs filling with damp metallic air. The acrid smell of cordite burns your nostrils, mingling with the earthy scent of churned-up mud. A low boom follows each whistle, like the heartbeat of some colossal beast. You close your eyes momentarily and picture yourself back home, maybe walking through a quiet park, the rustle of leaves overhead. Then another shell slams down and that dream shatters like a pane of glass. Joke 1. You could swear your ears have joined a heavy metal band without asking permission. Joke 2. If someone offered you front row seats to this concert, you'd politely decline. Joke 3. Next time you want fireworks, you'll stick to bonfire night and leave trench acoustics to the pros. Each wry thought is a flash of sanity cutting through your mounting dread. Between barrages, the trench settles into an eerie silence, like the calm before the next storm. In that hush, you catch soldiers whispering into their sleeves, praying, chanting rhymes, or silently reciting poetry to drown out the lingering hum in their minds. One man hums a lullaby he learned from his mother, his voice so soft it seems wrong in this violence-soaked earth. Sensory detail, you close your eyes to listen, the lullaby drifting like a ghost through the trench. Then whistle returns, higher and faster this time, as if the shells are playing cat and mouse overhead. You dive into a small dugout niche, just enough room for two, where the lieutenant crouches, face pale and eyes glassy. He clutches his revolver with white-knuckled fingers, breathing in shallow bursts. You lean toward him, whispering a joke about sharing care packages of earplugs, and he cracks a tight smile before the next explosion shakes the ground. A sudden blinding flash outside makes you flinch, imprinting after-images on your vision. You lift your hand to rub your eyes and accidentally press your palm to your cheek, expecting warmth, but instead you feel a fine layer of mud and sweat. Fringe rumor, some officers experimented with lining dugouts with canvas to deaden the concussion. But many soldiers claimed it made the shelter soggy as porridge and didn't stop the trembling. You imagine soggy porridge hurling itself at your head like an angry breakfast. Despite the terror, you're not helpless. You learn to count 1, 2, 3 from whistle to boom and measure distance. The faster the interval, the closer the shells land. It becomes a grim game of timing a survival instinct encoded into your mind. Historians still argue whether regular rotations out of frontline trenches reduced shell shock cases or simply moved traumatized soldiers to rear billets where symptoms persisted. You wonder if a 30-minute break would ever feel long enough to unload your frayed nerves. Between shocks, you discover the trench's hidden orchestra. The creaking of wood as sandbags settle the whisper of metal shards, inching into wood, and the distant whistle of wind through barbed wire. You realize that once you've heard enough explosions, even silence screams at you. Your skin tingles as if anticipating the next blast. You find yourself talking to the earth. "Come on, old friend, take it easy for a bit," as though the soil could offer comfort. Your corporal emerges from his dugout, a shaking soil from his cap, and offering you a flask of tepid tea. You accept with a grateful nod, sipping slowly despite the earthy aftertaste. The warmth snakes down your throat, a brief reprieve from the cold tremors racking your limbs. As you wipe the rim, you note several dents, where shrapnel glanced off proof that the world outside is nibbling away at you inch by bloody inch. A stranger moment, you glance up at the dark sky, spotting a single star, blinking defiantly amidst the barrage's glow. It feels like a celestial companion, a light, promising that something beyond this hell exists. You whisper, "Don't let me forget you're up there," even though a shell might erupt before the words finish. Fringe poem. Some comrades scratch tiny star shapes into wood to remind them of home. You consider doing the same next chance, turning mud-stained planks into makeshift memorials. The barrage intensifies, and the trench walls groan, sending dust motes dancing in the lantern's glow. You find your breathing ragged and your thoughts spin. Will this event ever end? The lieutenant shouts orders to man the trench line at the next signal, even as his voice cracks halfway through. You nod, choking back in panic, and grip your rifle tighter than ever. Then abruptly, the artillery, hush, falls. You glance around, dazed silence. The earth trembles one last time, and gone are the howls and booms, replaced by the skitter of surviving rats reclaiming their shattered homes. You lean forward, knees trembling beneath you, and place a hand flat on the mud. It feels oddly cool and solid after the tremors. You taste the air, now oddly still, and note a faint scent of blasted wood. You rise, slowly wiping grime from your face, and let out a shaky laugh. "Well, that was some tinny lullaby," you say into the quiet. The men around you exchange forced grins, relief and adrenaline sparkling in their eyes. You catch your reflection in a waterlogged helmet, haggard, mud-splattered, yet alive. Despite the horror, you survived another concert of shell shock. You tuck that small victory away, like a precious pebble, a talisman for future terrors. As you step back onto the duckboards, you remember the opening of this section, the roar, the whistle, the debate about shell shock's nature. You carry that knowledge forward sharper than any bayonet. And so the concerto of death ends, leaving you breathless and strangely bonded to your trenchmates, all of you united by shared trauma and whispered humor. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, but for now you brace yourself for a rare moment of quiet, and maybe, just maybe, a few minutes of sleep. Your toes throb as you pause at a slight widening in the trench, and you can't ignore the icy grip creeping up your calves. Each step feels like a gamble. Will you maintain circulation, or will flesh and bone Mourn your negligence. Fact: trench foot afflicted over 20% of frontline soldiers during the cold wet months of 1914-1915, and without prompt treatment, it could lead to gangrene and amputation. Historians still argue whether more frequent rotations or better issued rubber boots would have prevented the epidemic. Your future limbs hang in the balance of that debate. You peel off your sodden socks and peer at your feet. Pale, pruny skin wrinkles like overcooked potatoes, and tender spots ooze clear fluid where your toes once had a healthy color. Fringe tidbit: some troops claimed that rubbing whale oil mixed with sand into their feet created a temporary waterproof seal, though most doctors dismissed it as trading one infection for another. You swipe the ointment from your kit and grudgingly massage it into your aching soles, half expecting to see your feet start flapping away in protest. A medic kneels beside you under the glow of a lantern. He checks your pulse, then pokes at a blackening toe with a gauntleted finger. You flinch, but no scream escapes your lips, because the cold has numbed you into stoic silence. Sit tight, he murmurs, wrapping each foot in bandages and fresh woolen socks that smell faintly of disinfectant. You sigh in relief, even if that remedy is little more than hot rags, and hope it's better than freezing to death at your toes. You stand gingerly on the newly padded boards and tuck your boots back on, noticing how they slide on more smoothly now. The snug fit feels almost luxurious until the warmth fades and you recall that moisture still lurks beneath every layer. Joke: who knew being foot model ready involved so much blood and grime? You grin crookedly, the laugh echoing hollowly against the trench walls. Around you, fellow soldiers remove boots and compare trench foot scars to battle badges. One man brandishes a wooden splint for a toe he lost to gangrene. Another shows off a brightly painted nail, his attempt to keep a sense of normalcy by varnishing his remaining toes. The resulting kaleidoscope of colors looks oddly festive against the mud, but weirdly uplifting. You think if this is wartime fashion, bring on the lice beards next. Drip, drip, drip from the overhead tarpaulin reminds you that moisture is an ever-present foe. Even the act of changing your socks kicks up clouds of cold mist, settling back into the damp trench like restless ghosts. Sensory detail: each exhalation sends tiny steam puffs from your mouth, momentarily fogging the lantern light. You stir the air with your hand, clearing the mist, while feeling that familiar chill nibble at your wrists. A sergeant's voice cuts through the air announcing an inspection. You line up with trembling feet, and the officer prods and pokes each foot methodically. He grunts approval at your wrapped socks, then moves on. The ritual repeated daily feels like a perverse dance between life and loss. Historians still argue whether mandatory daily foot inspections reduce trench foot cases or simply push the problem onto exhausted medics who could barely keep up. You shuffle back to your spot and squat, catching sight of a puddle reflecting your weary face. You lean in, trying to look brave, but instead you see dull eyes rimmed with fatigue. You straighten, reminding yourself that each rotation, each treatment, each inspection is another step toward survival. The trench foot that once threatened to claim you now feels like a temporary beast to be tamed. Fringe rumor surfaces some soldiers melted chocolate bars and smeared the gooey mess on their feet, believing the sugar created an antimicrobial barrier. You wonder if that's any worse than whale oil, and whether your uniform would smell like dessert afterward. You tuck the thought away as you rise, with stiff legs determined to keep moving. As you press forward, you notice a crude sign painted on a plank: Toe Saver Station. Beneath it, spare socks and jars of mysterious ointment sit in a wooden crate. The humor of the sign, hand-drawn boots with angel wings, makes you smile despite the ache in your feet. It's a small act of defiance against mud and misery, a reminder that even here, Soldiers cling to humor like a lifeline. You step past the station, feeling slightly more hopeful than before. Your bandaged feet feel snug and protected if still achy. You remind yourself that every mud-soaked inch of this trench tests your endurance. Yet, here you are, still standing. With each painful step, you defy the trench foot's icy grip, reclaiming your body one wrung-through sock at a time. Ahead, you hear the distant hum of more boots approaching, heralding the next rotation. You lift your chin, preparing for another round of trench chores and survival puzzles. As you trudge on, you carry a quiet pride. Not everyone survives the trench foot gauntlet, but you've made it this far. Toes intact, spirit wry, and resolve unbroken. The acrid stench hits you before you see it. The rancid perfume of decay thicker than any gas attack. You round a corner and find a collapsed dugout, the earthen roof caved in. Within the rubble lies a half-buried corpse uniform, mottled with mud face, frozen in a silent scream. Fact: by mid-1916, the average life expectancy for a soldier in active trench duty was 6 weeks, making death and decomposition constant companions. Historians still argue whether faster burial protocols or more frequent rotations would have reduced disease spread, but here lies proof of nature's cruel patience. You swallow hard and edge closer boots crunching over broken boards. The body is gaunt, eyes sunken, and you notice small pustules poking the skin, signs of putrefaction, accelerated by damp warmth. Fringe tidbit: some soldiers believed that placing wildflowers beside the fallen encouraged their spirits to rest, though most officers dismissed the practice as sentimental folly. Still, you find a lone daisy growing through the mud nearby and carefully tuck it into the corpse's tunic pocket, a silent gesture bridging life and death. As you step away, you nearly trip over discarded kit, strewn across the trench floor, a mess of tin, corroded through an empty whiskey flask, dented like a wounded tin can, and a helmet split open by shrapnel. Sensory detail: the cold metal still radiates faint warmth, a remnant of body heat now vanished. You cup your hand and press it against the flask's curve, feeling the residual smoothness beneath layers of grime. A sudden scroll of movement in the gloom alerts you a rat emerges from the folds of the uniform, its whiskers twitching as it inspects the scene. You freeze, unwilling to disturb the creature conducting its grim inspection. Joke: well, at least someone's putting the remains to good use. The thought feels tasteless, yet the humor flares as a shield against nausea. You back away, careful not to disturb the fragile earth. The collapsed dugout reads like a tomb, wooden beams pinned like broken ribs. You lift your rifle and inspect the overhead barbed wire tangle, where the collapse began, imagining the moment its weight gave way and sent the earth tumbling down. Historians still argue whether better support timbers or deeper trenches would have prevented such cave-ins, but in this muddy graveyard, engineering theories matter little. Pressing on the trench narrows, and you find yourself brushing shoulder to shoulder with fellow soldiers. A medic behind you coughs softly. Tuberculosis was rampant in these cramped quarters. The medic clutches a small vial of iodine and dabs at his lips, hoping to stave off infection. Fringe rumor: some troops swore that chewing eucalyptus leaves kept respiratory illnesses at bay, though no official reports confirm its efficacy. You offer him a portion of your tea, sharing warmth and solidarity in the face of unseen pathogens. The trench walls ooze with moisture, streaks of brown and gray intersecting in organic patterns. You press your palm against the clay, feeling a faint pulse. The earth itself seems alive here, fueled by conflict and decay. Sensory detail: as you move your hand, water beads along your glove, dripping onto the floor in a rhythmic pattern that echoes the distant staccato of rifle fire. Ahead, a crude marker identifies a mortuary corner, a section where bodies awaited burial parties. You peer down the narrow walkway and count 3 dark shapes draped in canvas. Each inch closer reveals more detail. Bent limbs, blood-matted coats. The dull glint of dog tags reflecting lantern light. Fact grave parties often waited days to retrieve the fallen, risking fresh bombardment each time. The dead once comrades became obstacles to survival and targets for vermin. A stretcher bearer emerges from a side passage. Face slick with sweat despite the cold. He carries a makeshift stretcher, a wooden board, with rope handles grunting under the weight of a young private. The soldier's uniform is torn, one arm bent at an unnatural angle. You step aside, giving space, and watch the grunting pair navigate the slippery duckboards. Joke 1 for sorrow, 2 for burden. You whisper the old rhyme, twisting into dark humor. You follow them for a moment, noticing how the stretcher sways and dips with every uneven plank. The injured man moans softly, his breath ragged, and you catch a glimpse of fear in his eyes. Fear of dying or of surviving with a shattered body. Historians still argue whether improved battlefield medical triage or quicker access to field hospitals would have saved more lives, but here every second feels borrowed. As the stretcher passes, you spot a drop photograph, fluttering in a puddle. An image of a young woman smiling beneath a garland of flowers. You wade through the water to retrieve it, gently patting it dry on your sleeve. The photograph's edges are smudged, but the woman's eyes remain luminously clear. You tuck it into your jacket, a talisman against the trench's gloom. Moving on, you round the corner and notice the trench widens into a small dugout, where soldiers prepare tea over a portable stove. The kettle whistles cheerfully, a surreal soundtrack amid death's hush. You accept the cup, inhaling its fragrant steam. Sensory detail. The sweet warmth floods your fingers and lips, pushing back the chill that clings to your bones. You sip slowly, savoring the rare comfort, and glance around at battered faces illuminated by lantern light. In this brief sanctuary, you share hushed stories and suppressed fears. Laughter bubbles up as someone recounts a comical misfire. I aimed at Fritz, but nearly shot my boots. Joke 3 for the section lands with a shared chuckle, momentarily eclipsing the surrounding decay. Finally, you step back into the narrower trench, clutching your empty tin mug. The walls close in shadows, dancing ominously. You feel the weight of that collapsed dugout behind you, the bodies awaiting burial, and the medical struggle cradled in makeshift shelters. It's a grim tapestry of life and death, woven into every inch of this muddy passage. And yet, through the rot and ruin, you find a fragile strand of humanity. The daisy in the pocket, the shared tea, the borrowed photo. These small acts of remembrance and kindness tether you to a world beyond the trench's claustrophobic grip. Your heart beats with quiet resolve as you press forward, determined to carry these fragments of beauty amid the horror. In this trench of decay, you cling to life's ephemeral gifts, humor, solidarity, memory, to guide you through the darkness. You duck low as a sudden crack slices the air, and in that heartbeat of silence, you know a sniper's bullet has found its mark in the no man, and beyond. You freeze, heart-pounding shoulders tensed, as if waiting for the next whisper of death. Fact: German snipers often use captured Imperial Russian Mosin-Nagant rifles with telescopic sights, giving them an edge in pick-off accuracy, well beyond 800 yards. Historians still argue whether the Allies' response sniper sections matched that prowess. But on days like this, you trade any debate for a decent scope. Your breath catches in your throat as you peer through the trench's narrow periscope. A simple mirror device. that lets you survey the scarred earth without exposing your head. Fringe, tidbit, some enterprising soldiers glued mica sheets to their helmets to diffuse sniper glint, though most argued it made their heads shine like disco balls under sunlight. You silently thank whoever thought that up, imagining a squad of disco-dancing snipers lighting up the battlefield. Sensory detail. The air here tastes metallic, as if every exhalation dredges up iron shavings. You listen for that telltale ping echo, the sound of a bullet striking nearby sandbags, and in the next instant, you hear it plink. The impact flings mud upward in a soft plume. You realize how absurdly vulnerable you are, mere inches from instantaneous death. You crouch behind a reinforced fire step, gripping your SMLE rifle with white feather's bayonet fixed. Your palms sweat against the wooden stock, and you test the trigger pull, smooth, deliberate, hoping your training holds when you do get a shot. Joke. If only I could borrow that sniper's diary. Dear Journal, today, I perfected the art of subtle murder. Even as the humor flickers, you force your focus outward. A crack closer this time makes your teeth chatter despite the chill. You twist your head to glance at your fellow soldier next to you. His wide eyes reflect moonlight like a frightened deer. You pat his shoulder, whispering, "Eye of the tiger, mate. Just point squeeze and we'll call it a day." He manages a shaky grin, and you both settle into a tense vigil. Historians still argue whether early counter-sniper patrols, small units trained to spot and engage enemy marksmen, were more effective than simply ordnance barrages aimed at suspected sniper nests. Here, though, you suspect there's no artillery solution. Every shell risks flattening your parapet. Instead, you rely on observational skill, tracing shadows and waiting for that silent pause between bursts of rifle fire. You raise your periscope again and scan the churned earth beyond the wire. There, a faint glint by a crater rim catches your eye. You hold your breath, finger hovering above the volley sight. The shape shifts, the slender silhouette of a man cradling a scoped rifle. Your pulse skyrockets as you aim, your breath steadying. You've trained for this, practiced in shooting huts, but never with real stakes. Before you can squeeze the trigger, an officer's shout rings out, down, and splinters of wood fly as a high-velocity round slam into the trench wall just above your head. You duck instinctively, mud spattering your helmet. Lucky miss. You glance upward, seeing the beam fractured, dangling precariously. Fringe rumors some snipers preferred targeting roof supports to collapse trenches and trap men alive, though most dismiss such stories as a morbid legend. You quickly extract the splintered beam, feeling safer with fewer hazards overhead. Breathing heavily, you retake your position. The sniper is still there, crouched in his makeshift hide, oblivious to your presence. You line up the sights, focusing on that small, distant headgear. Time slows, the wind rustles barbed wire. A rat scuttles nearby, and you feel the world narrow to that one pinpointed target. Then a shadow detaches from the darkness and emerges onto the parapet, a messenger carrying a satchel of orders. The sniper shifts focus, momentarily breaking his aim. You seize the chance, squeeze the trigger, and the rifle recoils against your shoulder as one shot splits the night. You exhale, waiting for the telltale crack of impact. Seconds stretch into eternity, until a muffled groan drifts back, no triumphant shout, only the faint echo of a collapsed body being dragged out of sight. Your trenchmates stir in awed relief. "Good shot," whispers one. Another nod, eyes distant, as if they've all temporarily forgotten the darkness around them. You lower your rifle, chest heaving, wondering if you've just saved dozens of lives, or simply exchanged one death for another. The moral calculus is hazy here. Sensory detail. The silence afterward is oppressive, filled only by the drip-drip of condensation. You can almost hear your heartbeat thudding against the confines of your chest. You wipe a bead of sweat from your brow only to feel cold droplets as condensation forms on your helmet's rim. Joke. Well, Freddie Mercury would call that another one bites the dust. You murmur, feeling absurdly proud of your pun, as relief washes over you. Your trenchmate snickers the brief levity, cracking the tension like a shell hitting thin ice. You stand rifle slung and edge closer to the periscope again. The silhouette is gone, no sign of movement beyond the wire. Did you get him, or did he simply retreat wounded? You can't be sure. Historians still argue whether recorded sniper kills matched battlefield claims or were inflated by desperate men seeking any victory, however small. You step away, feeling the prickle of hairs on the back of your neck. The trench seems darker now, as if the night itself recoils from what just happened. You glance back at your comrades, their faces lit eerily by lantern glow, grim, determined, haunted. Then you catch a glimpse of your reflection in a puddle, framed by shattered beams and barbed wire. You hardly recognize yourself, eyes sharp, with adrenaline lips set in grim resolve. You pat your rifle affectionately, murmuring, "Good job, mate," and make your way back toward the dugout. Each step echoes a reminder of the thin line between hunter and hunted. In this trench, roles can reverse with a single heartbeat or a single breath. As you settle down, you recall the opening of this section, the sniper's silent eye, the debate over counter-sniper tactics, and your tense first shot. You tuck the memory away, knowing that tonight's victory, like all amid war's grime, is fragile and fleeting. You draw a shuddering breath, listening for any sign of movement in the dark. The world beyond the trench is still, but you know better than to trust silence. Somewhere out there, another sniper's eye might already be watching. You settle onto a soggy sandbag ledge and reach for your mess tin, bracing yourself for another culinary gamble in the belly of this muddy beast. The lid undoes with a reluctant squeal, revealing yesterday's stew, a grayish sludge, with floating chunks that look more like kitty litter than victuals. Fact: British soldiers at the front were issued roughly 1,250 calories per day in 1916, often delivered as bully beef, corned beef, hardtack biscuits, and ersatz vegetables, far below recommended rations for active combat. Historians still argue whether increasing caloric allotments would have significantly improved morale, or simply stretched already strained supply lines. You peer into the tin and sniff cautiously, catching a faint whiff of rancid fat mingled with wet cardboard. Fringe tidbit. Some troops claimed that soaking hardtack biscuits in tea overnight produced a porridge so revolting it could double as chemical warfare if smeared on barbed wire. You joke to yourself, "At least we're innovating in the culinary arts." The humor bubbles briefly, but the memory of last week's porridge surprise keeps you wary. A dull clang echoes as you tap the tin against a plank, praying for dislodged chunks rather than stubborn sludge. You scoop a spoonful and let it hover mid-air, gauging its wobble. It drips back slowly like mud melting off a shovel. You steel yourself and take a bite, chewy gritty, with a metallic aftertaste that lingers like a foul perfume. You chew deliberately, forcing the flavor down your throat. Joke 2. Tastes like victory, if victory were made of sawdust. Around you, other soldiers grimace and swallow their rations. One comrade, ever the optimist, cheerfully offers you a special seasoning, a pinch of condensed milk, scavenged from a supply drop. You doubt it'll mask the true taste, but accept the pinch anyway. The sweetness momentarily tricks your senses and you almost imagine fresh bread warming in a French bakery. Then the stew's true nature reasserts itself, And you remember why choking down rations became an accidental form of training in courage. Sensory detail. The tin's metal walls are cold against your palm heat, stolen away into the dank trench air. Steam rises in thin wisps, carrying a scent so chemically unnatural that you suspect your nose is playing tricks. You inhale sharply, and the pungent aroma settles into your lungs, making you cough mud-laden air and rancid fat negotiating for supremacy. You press the tin under your chin to catch stray drips discovering your tunic. Now sports a new stew, stain an olive green blotch that looks suspiciously like camouflage art. You glance up, remembering the rat encounter from Section 3. You'd swear that vermin could stomach this slop with a grin. A callback flickers if rats survived on bodies, perhaps they regard bully beef as haute cuisine. Halfway through your meal, an explosion farther up the line jolts your elbows, sending the tin skittering across the plank. It clanks against a sandbag and flips lid first into a puddle. You snatch it back, mud splattering inside, creating a new layer of grime atop the sludge. You stare at the mess mouth agape, and then laugh a short, incredulous bark at fate's impeccable timing. Joke 3. First, they take our boots. Now they ruin our dinner. A lieutenant strides past, clipboard in hand, inspecting tin cleanliness as part of supply audit rituals. You hastily wipe the tin's rim on your sleeve, hoping to hide the muddy betrayal. He nods curtly, jotting something unreadable. Debate historians still argue whether such audits improved supply efficiency or served only bureaucratic masters. You'd wager that neither the lieutenant nor history cares much about a single soldier's dinner woes. You toss a scrap of biscuit into a nearby puddle, watching a rat scurry over to claim the prize. You envy its luck, fresh rations delivered with no fuss. Sensory detail, you hear the rat's small chomp echo in the trench's hush, punctuated only by distant shell bursts. You lean back, closing your eyes, momentarily taste, still lingering vilely on your tongue. A fellow soldier passes carrying a tin of jam surprise. A dubious treat rumored to contain anything from beetroot to condensed milk. You barter your half-empty stew tin for a spoonful of jam. The exchange is swift, barbed with humor, he quips, better sweet than sewage. You smear the jam on a biscuit, half savoring the sugary reprieve. The sweetness floods your mouth, and for a blissful moment you're back home at the breakfast table. Then you recall your teeth will probably hate you later. But the trade-off feels worth every painful bite. You lean forward to rinse the tin in a spare canteen of water. The liquid turns murky gray instantly, and you wince only slightly cleaner than before. Debate trench cooks experimented with adding saltpeter to rations for preservation, but some argue it worsened the metallic taste and caused digestive issues. You resolve to bypass any experimental ingredients in the future unless you want to live on a stomach of iron filings. A drizzle of rain begins, tiny droplets pattering on the tin and your helmet. You tilt the tin to shield your eyes, but more stew splashes out, freeing a dollop that lands on the plank. You watch it dissolve quickly, mixing with mud and water, disappearing as if swallowed by the trench itself. You sigh, pondering how mud has an uncanny way of erasing all signs of human effort, be it building defenses or attempting a meal. As the rain intensifies, you tuck the tin under your arm, deciding that a half-eaten stew is better than none, but a ruined one isn't worth the cleanup. You empty the remaining bite into your mouth to avoid waste. Wasting is a greater sin here than starvation, and clamp the tin shut. The lid clicks reliably, a small triumph of function over the fiasco. You rise, a tin in hand, and walk toward the dugout entrance. where a kettle bubbles over a portable stove. Steam curls upward, coalescing into a warm cloud of promise. You step inside, placing the tin on a table strewn with utensils. The stove's heat purges the cold steel and you feel a tiny flicker of hope. Perhaps a fresh brew of tea will neutralize the stew's aftertaste. You take a seat on a damp crate tin balanced in your lap. A comrade passes you a thick slice of bread, probably stale, but still bread, and you tear it in half. Sandwiching the stew between bread transforms it into a dubious pie. But the carbs help settle your stomach. Sensory detail. You taste the contrast of soggy bread against the stew's grit, and the result is marginally more palatable, like eating a mud brick dipped in molasses. You catch your reflection in a spoon, propped against a canteen, mud-speckled face, grease-streaked helmet eyes, weary, yet alive. You remind yourself that in this trench even bad rations are a lifeline. Each tin scraped clean means fewer wasted calories and a small victory against starvation. You stand brushing crumbs from your sleeve and give the tin a parting nod, an acknowledgement of shared suffering and survival. You step back into the trench tin tucked safely in your greatcoat pocket for later reuse. As droplets hiss on your shoulders, you recall the debate over trench rations whether increased supply chains could outpace the mud rats and shellfire's demands. You suspect the answer lies not in logistics, but in the stubborn will of men who gulp down misery so they can keep fighting. With tin in hand and boots still mud-clogged, you trudge onward, fortified by bread steel and grim humor. The trench may starve you of comfort, but it won't starve you of resolve, at least not today. You settle beside a small wooden ledge, pulling a crumpled envelope from your breast pocket and smoothing its creases against your thigh. The thin paper feels fragile, like the hope it carries. Fact: by 1915, soldiers drafted in Britain sent an average of 2 letters and 1 postcard per week to their families, forging vital lifelines to normalcy. Historians still argue whether increased postal allowances boosted morale more than improved rations or leave rotations. But each penned word here feels worth more than a tin of bully beef. You bite the flap open and slide out a letter in familiar handwriting, your sister's looping script ink faded by time and travel. Fringe tidbit. Some troops kept letters beneath their helmets for comfort, claiming the paper's scent beat any gas mask filter. You press the note to your nose, catching a faint whiff of lavender, your mother's hand cream no doubt. And for a moment the trench's oppressive dampness fades. The letter begins with mundane news: the spring bloom in Yorkshire's garden, the neighbor's new puppy and your brother's failed exam. You chuckle softly, imagining the chaos if he flunked geometry again. Joke: at least rounding up imaginary sheep doesn't require trench boots. Your voice echoes too loudly into confined space, and you clamp your hand over your lips, sheepishly grinning at the comrade passing by. As you unfold a second sheet, you pause at the line: "We pray every night for your safe return." Your throat tightens and you swallow hard, tasting the copper tang of tears you're not sure you've earned. Sensory detail. The letter's paper rustles against your fingertips, each crinkle amplifying the gulf between home's warmth and this dank frontier. You begin your reply, dipping a stub of a pencil into a makeshift inkwell, a dented tin lid filled with diluted tea. You write slowly, "Dear family, I am holding up as best I can," and then hesitate. What can you say that rats wage war in your socks? That every shell renegotiates your courage? You opt for honesty cloaked in brevity. Mud is plentiful, as are memories of home. You pause, weighing each word. This letter could cause more worry than comfort. Historians still argue whether truth-telling in frontline correspondence did more harm than good officials favored canned optimism. But soldiers often relish the chance to vent real fears. You scribble on, "Please don't fret over storms. We've learned to tread water like ducks. I miss you all more than any French bakery." You stick in a small sketch a stick figure, trench lined with those infamous ducks, and date it June 1916. A comrade leans in offering a scrap of paper. "Use mine once you finish." Empathy in a war zone is as precious as ammunition. You nod in thanks the gesture, a small reminder of shared humanity. You notice a drop of muddy water slip from the plank onto the letter. Your protective mind battles the elements to preserve this fragile connection. Finishing the note, you fold it precisely and tuck it into its original envelope. Licking the flap with a cold, trembling tongue, you seal it with a decisive press and scribble the address on the front, "Miss E. Morgan, Dust 12, Meadow Lane, Sheffield." Joke. Let's hope the mail train outruns any shells. You stash the envelope back into your pocket, imagining it racing home through chaos and steam. Nearby, a runner emerges with mail pouches, canvas bags stamped with regimental insignias slung across his shoulder. He calls out names in clipped tones, his footsteps echoing down the muddy corridor. You join the small queue, heart pounding as you press forward. Each pouch feels like a treasure chest, weighed down by hope, worry, and gossip. When he reaches you, the runner hands over a single postcard. Your father's brief update. "Keep your chin up, lad. We're proud." The stamp's postmark reads, "Boulogne-sur-Mer, 9 June." You clutch the card, tracing its ornate border, and the swirl of your father's signature. Sensory detail. The cardstock feels cool and smooth between your fingers. An unexpected luxury here. You tuck the postcard behind your watch so you can glance at it when the trench's nightmares crowd in. A moment's peace offered in printed script. A rat skitters nearby, and you share a look surrounded by grime, yet holding family voices in your hands. The contrast sharpens your resolve like a bayonet. As you step away, you wonder if your outgoing letter will make the return journey. Historians still argue whether mail delays, sometimes weeks, exacerbated homesickness more than mitigating it. You decide to trust in the mail trains, imagining your words racing across fields and rails to bring warmth to Yorkshire hearts. You rise, stuffing the empty inkwell into your tunic pocket for later reuse, and tuck your pencil behind your ear. A gust of wind whistles through the trench, carrying a distant echo of artillery. You brace yourself, pressing the postcard to your chest like a shield. Joke, "If only I could mail the next shell back to the sender." You chuckle at the thought, a brief flare of absurd levity in the trench's gloom. You catch your reflection in a puddle, pale, determined, and clutching hope like a lifeline. You step forward past the makeshift post office crate, marked "Letters this way," and return to your fire step. In your breast pocket, 2 sealed words from home, promise, comfort ahead. In your mind, a fresh letter promises release. For now, these written lifelines tether you to home, anchoring your spirit amid mud and mayhem. You settle back into position, heart steady, your mind warmed by the flow of words. The night stretches on, but you're fortified against fear, letters in hand, pencil sharpened, ready to send more whispers across the front. A distant hiss rips through the air like a startled serpent, and before you can react, a sickly, yellow-green cloud drifts toward your trench entrance. You clamber to your feet, heart pounding at the sight of that silent, creeping menace. Fact: in April 1915, German forces first unleashed chlorine gas at Ypres, marking the start of chemical warfare's grim era. By the war's end, over 1.3 million casualties resulted from gas attacks. Historians still argue whether chlorine, phosgene, or mustard gas was the deadliest. Each had its brand of agony etched on victims' lungs. You yank open your gas mask, an awkward canvas bag fitted over the helmet, and clamp the rubberized mouthpiece against your face. Fringe tidbit. Some soldiers carried small tins of vinegar to counteract chlorine's effects, but most admitted the acidic fumes felt nearly as bad as the gas itself. You twist the filter valve, praying it clears the air faster than the poison can burn it. Sensory detail. The world tilts green at the edges, a sickly hue overlaying everything until you secure the mask. Your breath hisses in the rubber cavity. Each inhales, tasting faintly of charcoal and desperation. You cough, muffled but fierce, feeling acid crawl down your trachea as tears blur your vision. The mask's straps pinch behind your ears, reminding you that while it may save your life, it's hardly comfortable. A platoon sergeant barks orders, "Stand firm. Don't remove gear until all clear." You nod, though pride stings. There's no valor in clinging to life yet. Here you are, heart racing in the green gloom. A fringe rumor circulates that some regiments painted their masks bright red to scare enemy gas handlers, a tactic that likely jokers chemical troops more than stop them. You stifle a grin at the image of red-masked soldiers looking like embittered clowns. Historians still argue whether earlier detection systems like chlorine smellers or gas whistles would have reduced casualties. But in practice, the warning often came too late. You remember your training at the first sign of gas duct below the parapet. Don equipment and hold your ground. You obey, sinking low until only your helmet and mask peek above the mud. Joke 1. Well, at least now I get to experience luxury breathing. You force a chuckle, knowing that every laugh here is a small rebellion against panic. The green haze drifts in thicker tendrils, swirling like a malevolent mist. You slide your rifle to your side, leaving both hands free to adjust straps if the cloud shifts. Moments stretch into eternity. The hush was broken only by distant coughs and the soft whistle of gas settling into lower trench levels. Sensory detail. You taste metal and earth in every breath, as if each inhalation scrapes particles off the mud walls. The acrid odor sticks to your uniform, promising that even when the cloud lifts, its ghostly residue will linger. Suddenly, the all-clear whistle shrieks a short, sharp note that pierces the haze. You exhale, lifting your mask to gulp fresh air. Your lungs burn with relief and tears stream down, mixing with mud on your cheeks. You peer over the parapet. The world beyond is still tinted sickly green, but the worst of the cloud has passed. Joke 2. Note to self. Next time, bring popcorn for gas watching. Your trenchmate cracks a laugh, though his breath comes ragged. He spits onto the duckboards, grimacing as the toxic spit hissed faintly against the wood. You pat his back, offering silent camaraderie. You notice a fellow soldier kneeling beside a mud-soaked canister labeled phosgene, its stenciled letters half erased. He swears under his breath, admitting he'd hoped they'd never face that one. Phosgene causes delayed pulmonary edema, making it a particularly insidious killer. Historians still argue whether phosgene's delayed effects made it more feared than chlorine's immediate burn. You glance at the canister's faint outline and shiver, grateful your mask held. A corporal passes, handing out canisters of ammonia crystals in small tins. Soldiers crush and inhale the sharp powder when detectors shout, "Gas, a DIY countermeasure with mixed reviews." You take a pinch, sniffing deeply. The acrid vapor clears your sinuses but leaves your throat raw. Fringe tip. Some veterans claimed that chewing gum stabilized breathing post-attack, though most chewed simply to distract themselves from the panic. As the trenchmates adjust masks and straps, you note the subtle choreography click tighten. Breathe, each movement drilled until it's almost automatic. Yet the fear never fully dissipates. That hiss is etched into memory, a whispered promise of chemical carnage. You catch yourself hesitating before each breath, mind replaying the cloud's slow advance. Finally, you slip off the mask entirely, letting fresh air fill your lungs. The taste of mud returns a welcome friend compared to chemicals. You wipe the mask's lenses with a sleeve-clearing grime before stowing it. Joke 3. Perhaps next time I'll request scented filters lavender anyone laughter. Ripples through the trench, washing away some of the dread. You inspect your uniform. Faint green stains near the collar, but no burns or welts, a small miracle. You tuck the mask back onto your helmet straps, dangling like tangled vines. The trench's ambiance shifts as soldiers chatter about rumors of gas clinging to craters or lingering for days. Historians still argue whether trench gas chambers' sealed sections used to trap enemy troops were experimental war crimes or psychological warfare tactics. Either way, you're glad this isn't a demonstration. You lean against the damp wall, catching your breath, and let the trench's usual chorus. Drips, distant artillery, murmured chatter wash over you. The gas mask's taste lingers on your tongue, but so does the taste of survival. You remind yourself of the first hiss, the scramble for gear, and the debates about detection methods. You pat the mask, acknowledging its ugly necessity, and fix your gaze on the dark trench ahead. The gas episode joins your trench tales as another eerie stanza, a reminder that here the very air can betray you. With lungs still protesting, you trudge onward, gas mask slung at your side, ready for whatever comes next in this theater of mud madness and mechanized homicide. Night patrol orders crackle through the trench like a summons to a parody of a horror show, and you steel yourself for the descent into no man's land. You shoulder your rifle, its sling digging into your shoulder through layers of damp fabric, and trade a nod with your patrol mates, three silent shapes under the lantern's weak glow. Fact raids and patrols into enemy lines became routine. By 1916, intended to gather intelligence, capture prisoners, or simply keep the enemy off balance. Some patrols lasted only an hour, while others dragged men deeper into mortal danger. Historians still argue whether aggressive patrolling saved more lives than it risked. But tonight, you volunteer for the gamble. You slide down a rope ladder over the trench lip boots, thudding on the narrow fire step. Before you drop to the ground, an instant relief from the perpetual mud. Fringe tidbit: certain units painted the soles of their boots black and covered them in burlap to muffle footsteps, creating the illusion of ghostly infiltrators at dawn. You crouch low, grateful for the stealth trick but acutely aware that the slightest sound could draw enemy fire. Sensory detail: the night air tastes cold and metallic, laced with the distant echo of searchlights sweeping the shattered landscape. Your breath puffs in front of you like a small specter, vanishing almost as quickly as it forms. Ahead, barbed wire twists like a cruel garden stake maze. An obstacle too tall to step over, but easy to entangle your pack in. One wrong move and your patrol might rip itself apart. You lead the way, feeling every crunch of shale underfoot as if it's an alarm bell. A comrade whispers, "Watch your six," using the code for behind you, and you whirl just in time to catch a flurry of searchlight beams slicing through darkness. You freeze hard in your throat until the light moves on, whether it missed you or never saw you. You're not keen on asking. Joke: who knew being a trench ghost required auditioning for the role nightly? Historians still argue whether such small-scale raids had strategic value or primarily served propaganda, inflating battlefield exploits to buoy homefront morale. But as you inch toward an enemy listening post, you realize your fear doesn't care about grand strategy. It cares only about survival. You press forward, rifle raised, every nerve on high alert. Ahead, you spot two sentries pacing in front of a sandbag nest. Their helmets glint faintly under astral light faces obscured by shadow. You hand signal your squad to flank left, signaling wait with a raised fist. Silence becomes your ally, broken only by distant rat scuttles and the murmur of wind through twisted wire. A twig snaps somewhere, a betrayal that freezes your blood. You glance at your comrade. He meets your eyes, nods, and advances. In a swift move, born of desperation and training, you and your partner clamp hands over the nearest sentry's mouth, dropping him silently to the ground. His eyes go wide, panic flashing, but you press your thumb to his throat, muffling his gasp until he surrenders into unconsciousness. Sensory detail. The sentry's uniform smells of stale tobacco and fear, mingling in a tangible haze around you. Your partner dispatches the second sentry in a practice motion. No time for mercy, only efficiency. Fringe rumors some raiders carried small pillows to smother sentries without stains, making their strikes cleaner, though most shrugged off the idea as impractical. You yank a map from the post pocket, unfolding it by lantern glow. The map's edges are frayed ink smudged by mud and sweat, but key trenches and enemy positions are marked. You tuck it into your breast pocket like a stolen treasure. Historians still argue whether raiding parties should prioritize prisoners for interrogation or focus strictly on demolitions. Your briefing emphasized surveillance tonight, so you slip explosive charges against the sandbag wall. Small bombs set to detonate silently at dawn, cratering the enemy's listening trench. You affix the charges with wire, each click of the detonator clip echoing in your bones. Joke. If I survive this, I'll ask for a parking spot from HQ. You stifle laughter, knowing rupture will break the tension. Your partner smirks, wiping mud from his brow, and clicks the final fuse into place. You both beard the sentry pockets for rations or intel, finding a half-eaten biscuit and a pencil note about enemy mail schedules. You pocket both, thinking each is equally valuable. The map hints at a shorter route, back through a shell crater field. You signal to retreat. Each step is a calculated risk. Bones creaking, gasping for breath, heart pounding in a deafening drum. You step into a crater, scrambling up the opposite side, and in that moment, moonlight catches your face, making you a target. You shudder, ducking behind a shattered tree stump as rifle fire crackles overhead. Bullets chip away earth at your feet, another close call. You make a mental note of enemy mortar positions and the count of sentry souvenirs for reconnaissance reports to come. In that whirlwind of fear, adrenaline, and dark humor, you feel invincible and utterly terrified in equal measure. Yet, every sense is sharpened, the taste of cold air, the thud of your heartbeat, the shimmer of mud in the moonlight. At last, you reach your trench line and scramble up the duckboards, slapping the earth trench's lip with a splash. You slide inside, ducking below the ladder, as if colliding with safety itself. Lantern light greets you like a friend, revealing anxious faces illuminated by relief. You hand over the map and relay intel in clipped tones. Listened, mapped, wired, returned. Each word carries weight. Sensory detail warmth from a nearby oil lamp washes over you, dispelling some of the night's chill. You strip off mud-caked gauntlets and exhale, breath trembling. Fellow soldiers lap up your report, eyes bright with anticipation. A lieutenant thumbs through the map, murmuring thanks. Joke. Does this mean I get extra trench to leave? A few chuckles ripple through the men, easing tension like a salve. The officer smirks and shakes his head. Maybe he'll remember this moment on the home front. You rub mud from your face, catching a glimpse of your reflection in a shard of broken mirror. Affixed to the trench wall, a relic from home, turned into trench art. You hardly recognize the gaunt figure, Staring back, eyes glinting with purpose, uniform a mosaic of mud and bloodstains, smile faint but present. You realize in this trench crucible, fear and bravery dance a constant tango. As dawn's pale glow begins to seep through the trench top, you join the small squad in extinguishing lanterns and entering a brief, exhausted silence. The charges you planted will explode soon, marking another round of mayhem. For the enemy prove that sometimes offense is the best defense. You sink onto a wooden beam rifle at your side and trace the path you carved through mud and wire. This night's venture adds another scar to your trench saga. The silent raid, the stolen map, and the narrow escape. And despite the dread, despite the risk, you know you'll answer the next call driven by duty, fear, and that twisted hunger for survival. You lean your head back against the sandbags, eyes heavy. Tomorrow, you'll wake to the cratered aftermath. But for now, you savor this rare taste of triumph. In the trench's unending darkness, you press your back into the sandbags as another thunderous detonation rips the earth beside you, and in that split second a fresh crater yawns open where your parapet once stood. You lurch sideways, mud cascading down the trench wall in a tidal wave of sludge. Fact, by 1917, artillery bombardments had created over 1 million shell craters across the Western Front, each crater altering trench layouts and forcing rapid engineering repairs just to keep lines intact. Historians still argue whether systematic crater filling or strategic rerouting of trenches was more effective. But here and now, you rely on makeshift planks and sheer luck. The crater's jagged lip glows faintly by lantern light, revealing a half circle of churned earth, nearly 10 feet wide and deep enough to swallow a man whole. Fringe tidbit. Some enterprising soldiers believed that enemy shells could cook trapped rats alive in craters, creating pockets of noxious steam that bubbled up through the mud. Though most dismissed this as trench lore, you imagine the grim spectacle shuddering as a waft of damp heat drifts your way. You grip your rifle tighter and edge past the crater's brink, ducking under a collapsed support beam. Sensory detail. The air here tastes of ozone and wet clay, each breath pulling in particles that cling to your throat. A distant drip echoes through the hollow space where the trench used to be, water seeping in from the shell's impact, pooling in the cavity like a muddy pond. Joke 1. Well, at least we've got front row seats to Mother Nature's remake of Swiss cheese. You force yourself to chuckle, the sound bouncing eerily off the crater walls. The laughter falters as you remember the men who fell here, without warning swallowed by mud and metal. You trudge along the newly forced detour, ducking under barbed wire, strung across the crater's edge. Each pass of wire cuts at your clothes, snagging your greatcoat until you release a strand of fabric. Fringe tidbit callback. Remember those decorative rat pelt mittens from a Section 3? You'd need hairier gloves to handle this wire without shredding your skin. The trench floor slopes toward the crater, morphing into a funnel that collects rainwater and runoff from higher ground. You carefully descend the slippery slope, wooden planks rotting underfoot. Sensory detail, each step emits a sickening squelch and you feel mud ooze through the gaps in your boots, cold seeping into your socks. You wonder if Trenchfoot's icy cousin lurks here, ready to claim more victims. Rounding the crater, you spot two comrades attempting to shore up a parapet, hammering wooden stakes into the mud. Their tools clatter even louder than the lingering echoes of artillery. You join them lifting a soaked plank into place. Joke 2. Who knew carpentry would be part of the grunt's curriculum? They grin, nodding as they adjust a sandbag to steady the beam. While you work, a shell winds overhead and slams into the crater's rim, flinging mud and debris like a volcano. You duck instinctively, feeling the shockwave flutter your helmet straps. The parapet trembles, and you and your comrades brace against it, hearts hammering. Historians still argue whether reinforcing craters with sandbags or using corrugated iron more effectively prevented collapses. But in the frenzy, you'll take any barrier that stays put. With the wall temporarily stabilized, you peer down into the crater. A small pool of water reflects the lantern's flicker, and you glimpse a hand-sized clump of tangled barbed wire, submerged beneath the surface. A sudden ripple suggests something just moved, another rat seeking refuge. You shiver, realizing that below the water's surface, you're not just battling Earth, but the unseen inhabitants of this muddy underworld. You clamber out of the funnel, wiping your gloves on your breeches, and press on toward the trench's former terminus. Along the way, you pass marker stones, scrawled with chalk, danger unstable, and enter at own risk. The warnings are quaint, nearly ceremonial in the grotesque theater of war. You scoop up a handful of mud and flick it at a warning sign. Joke 3. My risk assessment says only 2 out of 3 shovelfuls will collapse. Your friends chuckle, the humor brightening the dim passage. Up ahead, a makeshift ladder leads to a dugout entrance that survived the collapse. The steps are coated in slick clay, and you descend with exaggerated caution, as if entering a slippery slide. Inside, you find 2 dry boards, laid across benches, your reward. A momentary respite from the trench's quakes. You toss aside your helmet and let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Sensory detail. The dugout smells of damp wood and stale air mixed with the faint aroma of rum and tobacco. You settle onto one of the boards, feeling its uneven grain beneath your back. The rumble of distant shells is muted here, reduced to a soft vibration beneath your boots. You close your eyes, savoring the brief calm. A comrade offers you a swig from his rum flask, an unofficial ration for emergencies. You take it gratefully, warmth flooding your chest, as the alcohol cuts through your chill. You pass the flask back, offering nods of gratitude. Historians still argue whether granting soldiers limited alcohol rations improved morale or led to decreased alertness. But in this deep hole in the earth, you'll credit it for every ounce of courage. You prop yourself up on one elbow and peer out through the dugout's narrow slit, watching the crater's lip sway under another impact. The mud wall buckles and you gasp, gripping your comrade's arm. Together you scramble up, grabbing your rifles. You launch yourself onto the trench floor just as another shell obliterates the makeshift barrier you and your mates had just built. Mud rains down and you wipe a smear from your face, staring at the ruined plank in disbelief. You glance at your presumably repaired trench, now a fresh crater deeper and more chaotic than before. You can't help but marvel at the cycle of destruction and repair, build, collapse, rebuild ad infinitum. This endless loop feels like the trench itself is alive, breathing in your efforts and exhaling calamity. You plant your feet on the firmer ground where duckboards have been relaid and adjust the strap on your gas mask pouch. Call back to Section 10. You're glad the mask isn't needed here, but the memory of green haze lingers in every breath. You recall the debate over anti-shell shock measures in Section 4 and wonder if any psychological therapy could steel you for this relentless ruin. The rain begins anew, pattering on tarpaulin overhead, each drop echoing like a countdown. You hurry past the crater's edge, resolving that tonight's detour will be the last. With each step, you memorize the shifting landscape, the lengthening of the detour, the new collapse zones, and the placement of sandbags that never hold. You sense the trench's history being rewritten beneath your boots. At the far end, you round a bend into the original trench route, where fresh duckboards await. You step onto them, feeling them flexing solidly under your weight, a minor miracle. You pause, closing your eyes to feel the rhythm. No squidgy squelch, just firm wood. It's a small reassurance that survival isn't purely random, that sometimes after chaos comes stability. You exhale, tightening your grip on your rifle, and survey the trench as if greeting an old battered friend. Its walls bear new scars, fresh plaster, and hastily driven stakes, but it stands persisting, surviving and demanding you do the same. You pat the nearest sandbag affectionately, offering thanks for its resilience. With the crater catastrophes behind you, you trudge onward each step, a testament to human determination. In the face of mechanical mayhem, you steel yourself against the next shell, the next collapse, the next muddy upheaval, because you know that in this world of mud and metal, hope is built inch by inch, just like these duckboards underfoot. You duck under a low beam and step into the flickering chaos of the casualty clearing station, where wounded soldiers lie on stretchers side by side, like a grim art exhibit. Fact: at peak times in 1917, British casualty clearing stations processed up to 1,000 injured men per day, working around the clock to triage, treat, or transfer them to hospitals. Historians still argue whether decentralizing care closer to the front lines reduced mortality or simply overwhelmed medical staff with the endless influx. Tonight, you're on stretcher-bearer duty, an unglamorous, heart-wrenching role that demands both speed and steely nerves. The air tastes of antiseptic and fear. You shoulder a stretcher and move toward a new arrival, a young private clutching his side, where blood seeps through a torn tunic. Fringe tidbit: some field medics believed that a quick application of horsehair poultices could staunch bleeding faster than standard bandages, despite veterinarians' warnings that animal hair carried its pathogens. You bite your lip, balancing duty with disgust, and lift the stretcher, wincing as the private's teeth grit against pain. Sensory detail: the metal rails underfoot clank beneath stretcher wheels, each echo a reminder of lives shifting on the brink. You wheel the casualty past rows of lit lanterns dangling from overhead beams, their dim glow revealing faces etched with agony and hope in equal measure. A drip of blood falls to the wooden floor, splattering like a morbid rain. A nearby orderly mumbles, "Keep moving, lads, no time." To pause his voice, weary but resolute. You guide the stretcher to a triage table, where a surgeon waits, scalpel gleaming in hand. He murmurs instructions: arterial wound, pack it, then ship him west. You slide a pack of gauze into the opening hands, steady despite the private's trembling. Joke 1. Next time, remind me to volunteer for tea duty instead. Your companion cracks a tired smile, wiping sweat from his brow with a blood-stained rag. Behind the table, wounded men shout out for water, morphine, or word from home. One soldier, half-conscious, moans, "Is that a letter I hear?" You pause, fishing in your pocket for a stamped postcard you'd saved, then catch yourself. No time for personal mercy. You hand him a slug of water instead, watching his throat swallow the cool liquid gratefully. Joke 2. At least the water's fresher than trench stew. He manages a hoarse chuckle, then drifts back into pain's haze. Suddenly, the station shakes another distant shell strike, and lanterns swing dangerously, sending flickering shadows across the wounded. A nurse hisses, "Hurry!" and you tighten your grip on the stretcher, mindful that every second matters. Debate. Some argue whether mass casualty drills before deployment could have streamlined operations. But here, the practice comes only from sheer repetition and grim experience. As you wheel the stretcher toward the evacuation point, you pass a medevac trolley stacked high with blood-soaked bandages, half-used morphine syringes, and broken medical instruments. fringe rumor a few surgeons dipped scalpels in whiskey before surgery. To stave off infection, a practice officially banned but whispered about in the mess. You shudder at the thought, but admire the improvisation born of necessity. You reach the exit ramp where a waiting ambulance, a horse-drawn cart, rigged with wooden slats, awaits. You ease the private onto the floor, securing him with straps. His breathing is shallow, eyes half closed, but he manages a tortured grin. You pat his shoulder and whisper, "You'll be safer soon." As the horses pull away, you salute the cart's rear, watching it disappear into the muddy night. Sensory detail. The clip-clop of hooves recedes, replaced by the station's chorus of groans and shouted orders. While you return for the next stretcher, you spot a makeshift notice pinned to the wall. Ward 3 Critique of Surgical Techniques at DO 200. You smirk doctor feedback sessions even amidst war's chaos. Joke 3. I suppose a lecture on antiseptic protocol is as welcome as a rainstorm in this hole. You shake your head amused at the absurd normalcy of medical academia playing out here. You cross the dimly lit bay and meet another casualty, a sergeant with a shattered leg moaning at each bump of the stretcher. You lift him gently, noting the jagged bone through the torn cloth. You recall the debate from Section 5 about trench foot treatments. Both required careful bandaging, but here the stakes are far higher. You vow to handle this load with extra care, aware that a single jostle could cost this man his limb or his life. A junior medic approaches seeking guidance. He is pale, barely 18 hands, trembling. You offer a quick tip, keep the head stable, move as one and speak, he'll know you're there. He nods, swallowing his fear. Sensory detail. You smell the metallic tang of blood and the sweet relief of antiseptic spray. A surreal duet clashing in the corners of your nose. You finish loading the sergeant into another cart, securing him among groaning comrades. The driver tips his cap, acknowledging your effort. You turn ready to fetch more stretchers but pause when you hear a distant voice call out, "Incoming transfer, Major Burns case." A rush of adrenaline sidelines your exhaustion as you sprint toward the siren-lit entrance, where a mule-drawn ambulance stops. A burn victim lies on a stretcher, skin raw and glistening beneath a thin layer of burn salve. The man's face is unreadable, lost between consciousness and trance. Fringe tip, some field nurses blended pigeon droppings into a paste to soothe burns, a folk remedy as controversial as it was grim. You swallow hard, steeling yourself for the worst. As you lift the stretcher, you feel the victim's hand clamp around yours, weak but desperate. You lock eyes and offer a firm nod. "We've got you, mate." His reply is a hoarse whisper. "Does it hurt?" You hesitate, then lie gently, not as much as the forgetting. The answer surprises you, poetic for a man surrounded by carnage. You roll him toward the rear, every labored breath a reminder of war's indiscriminate cruelty. At the exit ramp you pause, noting the Major Burns case and ordinary wounded in the same cart, equality in suffering. Debate did grouping burn victims with less severe cases conserve space and time, or did it dilute specialized care? Here, triage means balancing many needs with too few hands. You secure the last strap, then step back, shoulders slumping as adrenaline ebbs. The station falls into a lull. A brief pause between waves. You sink onto a low bench, wiping sweat and grime from your brow. Sensory detail. The silence is thick, punctuated only by distant moans and the soft drip of water from a leaking roof. You close your eyes, letting exhaustion and the weight of faces you've carried wash over you. A nurse slides a tin cup of tea toward you, black, strong, and more welcome than any luxury. You cradle it, feeling the warmth seep into your chilled fingers. You take a slow, deliberate sip, savoring sweetness that tastes like reclaimed humanity. You lean back, realizing that as horrific as this triage chaos is, it's your lifeline too. A way to act, to help, to salvage hope amid the devastation. You rise, setting the cup aside, ready for the next wave. You check your watch, 8:02 hours. In 2 hours, the station will shift to fresh crews, giving you a chance at rest if you're lucky. You glance at the row of vacant stretchers, lined up like open arms waiting for the wounded. You step forward, heart steeled once more. Tonight's lessons in medical triage chaos, navigating overfilled stations, debated techniques, and fringe remedies have etched themselves into your mind. You shoulder the next stretcher, whispering a vow to each man you carry. I won't let you down. And though the night stretches on, you march into the fray with wounded compassion and stubborn resolve, determined that no matter how many arrive, none will be ignored. You trudge forward toward the final firing step, the trench narrowing as if steering you toward the war's abyss, and you can't shake the weight of everything you've seen so far. Fact: by 1917, troops on the Western Front spent an average of 15 days in frontline trenches before rotation, meaning you're on your last shift before relief if all goes as ordered. Historians still argue whether shorter rotations actually improved combat effectiveness, or simply shuffled shell-shocked soldiers around, but your weary body counts every hour until the whistle blows. Ahead, the trench walls bulge. With fresh sandbags, reinforcements rushed in after the last raid. Fringe tidbit: some battalions painted personalized graffiti on sandbags. Names, cartoons, even love notes to claim ownership of their stretch and boost morale. You spot a crude heart doodled beside the words, "Sweetheart, I'll be home," and you pause, imagining the baker's daughter waiting by the hearth. You trail a muddy finger through the ink, feeling a pan that's part longing, part guilt. Sensory detail: the air is thick with the earthy perfume of damp sand, mingled with the acrid tang of leftover cordite from earlier shelling. Each inhalation tastes like memories and metal. You run a hand over the rough burlap, its fibers prickling beneath your gloves, and the simple contact grounds you in the present moment, reminding you that this is home too. However unwillingly, you approach the firing step where a handful of men stand, guard rifles resting but eyes alert. Their faces are mannequins of exhaustion, yet sockets glint with resolve. You join them, settling into the designated gap, and lift your rifle to the ready position. Joke 1. Front row seat to the apocalypse, no RSVP required. Your trenchmate snorts the sound, muffled by the mud-crusted collar of his tunic. A distant whistle blows a reminder that shells never sleep. You grip your rifle's stock, the wood slick from condensation, and peer over the parapet. Below, the churned earth stretches into no man's land, dotted with shattered wire and crater scars. In every dip and rise, you see the silhouettes of ghosts, fallen comrades, rats, and the trench itself forever changed by conflict. As the minutes tick by, you notice a small alcove carved into the earth, a hidden niche used for whispering prayers or sharing cigarettes in hushed solidarity. You slip inside, crouching on mud-soaked planks, and pull from your pocket a tiny icon of Saint Christopher, the soldier's patron of safe journeys. Fringe rumor: some men claimed that sleeping with such charms under their helmet wards off bullets, though others joked it only invites jealous rounds. You clasp the medallion, feeling its cool metal surface press comfortingly against your palm. Historians still argue whether religious tokens genuinely bolstered morale or simply offered a placebo of hope. Here in the trench, faith and fear overlap until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You tug the charm inside your tunic close to your heart, imagining a protective barrier against unseen wounds. Sensory detail. The trench's silence swells into an almost tangible presence, punctuated only by drip-drip of condensation and the distant groan of artillery caissons. You breathe out slowly, watching your breath curl in the lamplight, a fleeting ghost that vanishes as quickly as it appears. The cold seeps into your bones, but the medallion's warmth reminds you of warmer days. You glance at your watch, just under 2 hours until relief. You exhale in a long, shaky sigh and let your shoulders drop by a fraction. Joke 2. 2 hours of this, and I'm ready to trade my rifle for knitting needles. A nearby soldier cracks a grin, dreaming aloud of weaving wool socks that won't give you trench foot. As time drifts, you spot a comrade stumbling toward a water canteen station. His canteen, empty lips chapped. You rise and fetch fresh water, handing it over with a nod. He tips his helmet in thanks, and you share a moment of silent understanding. Small kindnesses form the threads that keep you from unraveling here. Suddenly, a soft scrape echoes ahead, where the trench splits to a communication post. You peer around the corner and spot a dispatch runner arriving with a folded note. A corporal takes it, reads silently, and then passes it back with a weary shake of his head. Debate historians still argue whether improved communication field telephones versus runners would have mitigated confusion. But here, each message still relies on a man sprinting through mud and danger. You approach the corporal and offer to relay the note to the next dugout. He hands you the paper crumbled and smeared with mud, and you fold it gently, aware of its fragile power. The message reads, "Relief in 2 hours. Hold positions. Excellent work." Relief sweeps through you like a wave, washing out tension in a single breath. Sensory detail. The paper feels damp but intact. Beneath your fingers, its thin fibers saturated with hope. You tuck it into a dry pocket close enough to read whenever the trench's darkness creeps too close. Joke 3. Hold positions. I've been clinging to a plank for an hour. Laughter warms the group, a shared ember in the cold gloom. You return to your post rifle at the ready, but mind already drifting toward a warm bunk and a proper meal. The hours were less oppressively now, buoyed by the promise of rotation. You notice the trench's walls look slightly less menacing, more like an old friend who's seen you through uncountable horrors. You lean your cheek against the rifle butt, closing your eyes for a moment. In that stillness, you replay the medallion's weight in your hand, the sketched heart on the sandbag, the lines in your letter home, and the lifeline of relief orders. Each memory is a stitch in a salvaged tapestry of humanity here. As you brace for the final stretch, you reflect on every section's promise. From mud and rats to shell shock and trench foot, from snipers to steel craters, and medical mayhem, from gas attacks to night raids and back. This trench has tested every fiber of your being. Yet here you stand, still breathing, still joking, still hoping. You exhale, feeling the rifle's wood echo, the rhythm of your heartbeat. The trench's murmurs, drips, distant rumble. Whispered jokes lull you into a weary calm. Relief whistle is still 2 hours away. But for now, you hold the line, fortified by small acts of faith, camaraderie, and stubborn survival. You lean against the trench wall, exhausted yet alert, as another muted boom rolls across the shattered landscape. Each distant thunder a heartbeat, reminding you that home lies both beyond and beneath every echo. You clutch your rifle loosely, eyes tracing the muddy water lining the parapet, your thoughts drifting like that water toward distant hearts and faces you yearn to see again. You imagine the rhythm of life beyond the front, your sister tending her garden, your father at his workshop, and neighbors greeting you with familiar smiles rather than the flash of shells. Joke, I'd trade this muddy trench for a muddy backyard any day. Fact: by mid-1916, over 1 million men were serving simultaneously on the Western Front, each one driven by the same longing for letters, news, and the promise of post-war reunions. Historians still argue whether extending leave periods or improving mail systems would have lessened that homesick weight, but for you, even a single postcard could feel like a lifeline thrown across a stormy sea of barbed wire and mud. You trace a line in the dirt with your boot, envisioning the path leading from these trenches to the world beyond cobbled streets, open fields, and laughter that doesn't echo with gunfire. Fringe tidbit: some soldiers carried clippings of local newspaper cartoons in their tunic pockets, tiny reminders of peacetime jokes and carefree Sundays. You rummage through your coat and produce a yellowed cartoon featuring a grinning cat and a bad pun. What's a cat's favorite button? Pause. You tuck it back, smirking at how such a simple drawing once made you snort with laughter. Sensory detail: the cool night air carries the faint scent of wood smoke from distant farmhouses, so faint you almost doubt it exists. But there it is, sweet and homey, tucked between the sulfur tang of cordite and the dank musk of earth. You inhale, savoring the illusions of warmth brushing your cheeks. A comrade emerges from a dugout, holding a bundle of fresh letters, an enveloped treasure trove bound in twine. You watch him distribute the mail, faces lighting up as each man clutches his fragment of home. You catch one glance at your name on a small parcel and feel your heart stutter. You would kill for that moment, but instead you steady yourself, reminding your emotions that duty comes first. Joke 2: if I survive this, I'm opening a stationery shop. You chuckle at your absurdity selling paper after enduring enough ink stains to fill a river. But the humor is honest, a shield against the ache in your chest. You move on, letting the mail excitement drift around you like confetti you can't catch. Your thoughts settle on the promise of returning to your hometown. Parade, laughter banners, safe streets. You envision children skipping stones in the river, the chirp of crickets replacing artillery's roar, and the taste of fresh bread instead of tins of bully beef. You realize this yearning isn't mere escapism. It's the compass guiding every step you take through this hell. Historians still argue whether mass media's wartime reports helped reassure homefront families or inflated expectations that relief would come overnight. Here in the trenches, you care little for broad debates. You care about Mrs. Turner's plum jam and Mr. Nguyen's coral-rimmed spectacles that made you laugh when he winked at you in school. You smile at the memory toes, itching for well-polished boots and sidewalks. Fringe rumor some men collected pebbles from training grounds before deployment, burying them in their pockets as home tokens. You pat your greatcoat and find a small, smooth stone, stamped with your initials and anchored to days before mud and misery. You lift it, feeling the stone's solid warmth, and whisper, "Not long now." Sensory detail: the moonlight glints off your rifle's metal, turning it briefly into a silver thread, weaving your past and present together. You grip the stock, letting its cool weight remind you that each click, each trigger pull, and each step through this trench is measured against the promise of peace. You step forward to the trench mouth where relief teams will arrive at dawn. You pause at the threshold, inhaling the dark sky's hush. It's a ritual: breathe in this moment because soon you'll be whisked away from dog-eared rations and the ceaseless drip of mud. Joke 3: next stop, massage parlors and 3 warm meals a day. Your trenchmate laughs, and you share a look that balances hope with disbelief because war has taught you not to trust promises until they're underfoot. You scan the trench's scars, repaired, craters, patched walls, duckboards replaced time and again. and realize they mirror your battered soul. Yet each repair stands testament to human resilience. Mud heaps tethered by wood wire, fastened with barbed resolve. Trench life mended one plank at a time. You inhale that truth, exhale the tension coiled in your chest, and take a final step past the firing step. As you cross the threshold, relief soldiers greet you with nods and badges of honor, meters to freedom that once seemed galaxies away. You hand over your rifle, its wood warmed by your grip, and feel a wave of emotion you can't name: pride, relief, sorrow for the trench that sheltered you, guilt for leaving mates behind. You stand in the early gray light, breath clouding then dissolving like so many fears. The diggers who replace you march into the trench's belly, and you march out toward the stairs leading above. You feel each rung beneath your boots, carrying you closer to dawn and the war beyond. Your heart hammers with anticipation as you emerge onto firm groundstones and grasp real wind unfiltered by mud walls. You pause, tilting your head skyward. The moon's final glow fades, revealing a pale horizon where sunlight will soon break. You taste that promise like the sweetest wine, grounding you in safe soil at last. You brush mud from your shoulders, the last vestige of this subterranean realm, and breathe deeply. You're no longer in the endless trench loop. Today the cycle ends. Ahead, warm trenches turned home, letters clasped in gentle hands, laughter that doesn't echo with fear. You close your eyes, imprinting this moment of transition, a muddy soldier turning into a hopeful civilian. You whisper, "I'm coming home," not as a plea, but as a vow. Now, with your boots finally solid on familiar earth, allow your breath to steady and your heartbeat to slow. Feel the pulse of calm radiate from your legs up into your chest, as if each step forward milks the tension from your wounds. The memories of rattling shells and sodden walls recede, like a distant tide, leaving only the gentle wash of dawn's light across the fields. You embrace the quiet softness, the whisper of the breeze through the grass, instead of the punishing stomp of boots on duckboards. Recall the small kindnesses that stitched you together here. The comrade's flask of tea, the mourner's daisy tucked into a uniform, the shared letters crinkling with lavender and hope. Each one was a thread binding you to life even in the trench's icy grip. Let those threads guide your thoughts, now weaving a tapestry of renewal around your soul. Feel warmth flood your fingers and toes as you glimpse a patch of sunlit ground where grass bends beneath your weight. Let that warmth spread, gently melting away phantom aches in shoulders and back. Breathe in the open air, crisp, clean, unmarred by gunpowder, and let it cleanse every memory of mud and rot. You are no longer bound by those walls. You are free to stand tall under the vast sky. In this soft awakening, invite peace to cradle your mind. With each heartbeat, release one last whisper of doubt. With each exhale, let gratitude fill the space it leaves behind. You have endured the trench's cruelty and emerged steeled by compassion and courage. Now step forward into calm, carrying the lightness of fresh morning and the promise of home in every step.